Just going to give you guys a quick run through my sandpaper range, which ones I use at the moment. So with these sanding sponges, Norton's pretty good, most of their sandpapers. They've obviously, all sandpaper brands, like abrasive brands, have loads of different, they might have like a bottom, middle and top range, but these ones here, speed grip discs, they're actually really quite good. As you can see, I've got loads of them in here and we get them at a discounted price if we buy more. But they're these ones here. Right the way through, from the coarse ones to the fine ones, they actually seem to last quite a long time. RevCut, I've found that their finer grades, 180 and lower, really don't seem to last that long. I mean, they're better than some of the brands out there, but anything above, anything below the numbers that are lower, so coarser than 180 grit, seem to be fine. But anything above that, anything finer than the 180 grit seems to be a bit average. What else do we use? 3M Sandpaper's got some great sandpapers. These purple ones we use on these blocks. We've got they've got a bit of a range there. But these purple sandpapers, they're really good. And they've got these holes in here, so that's for your dust extraction for a vacuum cleaner. Getting some really good results with that. Even these 3M soft hand sanding sponges, these are great. They're a must for any panel shop, I believe, anyway. Dry sanding. Now, another thing I thought I'd touch on is which sandpapers do you need? And we've got just about everything you can think of, and some of them get used more than others, but I still like to have the whole range. So 80, we haven't actually got any 40 grits on the orbital, but don't find we use them very much, to be honest. So 80, 180, 240, 320, 500, 600, and we've even got a few 1000 grits. We've even got these for the mini roll-up grinder. They're 80 grits too, and 36. So they're the coarse ones, good for grinding. But yeah, these RevCut, these 320s, they're okay, but I've found that there are other brands on the market that last a bit longer than them. Some of the 3M gold ones are pretty crap. This is just, I don't even know what these, these ones here. Back in the day, I remember these used to be like some of the best on the market. Whereas now, I think it's just like the other brands have caught up. But 3M do have another range that is better in the discs. So it's one of those things that you can just look around and you've just got to find what works, what's a reasonable price and performs well. Because you can have sort of a bit of a false economy by trying to buy cheap sandpaper and you'll use a box up just to sand one panel down. So you would have been more cost effective buying the better brand. It lasts that bit longer. Scotch-Brite, I think that's 3M. That's most people use the 3M ones. A lot of the other ones are just garbage and use it to Scotch-Brite one panel and it's throwaway material. Kovacs, any of these big discs in Kovacs, I find is pretty much garbage. However, they've got some really good 75mm for the mini orbital sander for these, and this is for polishing. Yeah, so they don't actually say on this one, but I think it's like 2.5 or 3,000. They've got a green one and they've got the yellow ones too. So the yellow ones I've got out over here. The yellow ones, they do say the grit on it, which is 1500, and these are great. You can actually sand bits of dust out with that and then polish straight up over the 1500 grit if you want, but if you find that you're being left behind with a few sanding scratches, then you can go to the black or the green ones. And what else have we got? So yeah, there is a couple of different types of sandpaper. You've got silica carbide, which would be most sandpapers are silica carbide, but you've also got aluminium oxide. If you're working on, say, boats or aircraft, you may want to look into getting the aluminium oxide because Silica basically is glass, which is made from sand, and it can be corrosive to the aluminium, so something to be wary of. Although it still can be used as long as you treat the surface. Maybe just give it a really good wax and grease remover to remove any of the contaminants. So there you go. I think I've covered everything. Oh yeah, here we go. We've got our wet sanding. That's something that rarely gets used around here. I'm not much of a wet sander. When I started my apprenticeship, a couple of the older guys, they tried to get to do a bit of wet sanding, but these days, especially with those sanding sponges, it's really not necessary. I do plan on doing a video where I just get a couple of similar panels and prep them up, one using wet, one using dry. We'll do a timer, see how long each one takes, and pros and cons of each method. But there is more than one way to skin a cat. If you feel more confident doing your wet sanding, well then go for it. If I was to do wet sanding, I'd probably like block it down with say something like 240, and then go from 240, maybe give it a guide coat, spray on black guide coat, and then go to 800 grit for your final finish. And 800 is usually pretty fine to paint over with wet or dry. I have found wet sanding, you need to go a little bit finer, so I would happily paint over 500 or 600 dry sanding, but if I was to do 500 or 600 wet, I would probably have a few sanding scratches, so that's why I like to go 800. On a blend I'd probably more go 1200 if I was wet sanding. When I'm doing a blend I like to remove all the old orange peel, and I can do that with say 600 grit dry on an orbital sander, and that takes less than a minute to do a panel, and then I'll go over the edge of that with some 800 grit with these softback sanding sponges. Obviously but what I do is I clean the panel first with water and a bit of wax and grease remover, but if you were to do the same thing, say remove all your orange peel doing that wet, it's a lot harder because it takes a long time. You've got to do it all by hand. I mean, I think they do have, you know, these pads that you can use wet, but I just don't see the use in it. You just make a bit more of a mess, and nothing really seems to be gained out of doing it that way. So there you go. Hope you've enjoyed watching this video. I hope you've learned something or two, a thing or two, and if you've got any questions, I'll do my best to answer. I mean, there's never really one absolute definite answer in this trade because there's so many variables. A lot of people ask me how much paint to paint a car. Well, it's definitely going to vary on the size of the car, the colour that you're painting it, you're doing it clear over base, so yeah, so many variables, and the kind of paint you're using, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching, and this has been another Gunman production. Goodbye.